Hearing the voice, so young, resounding over the water from a distant, unseen place, I knew fully and exactly what it meant, how it hit me, and how it would touch me in the sprawl of the years of my life, the adulthood before me at 20, and knew thus that there is the soul nobility, an obligation to carry the child man carefully into life without exoneration, without apology, into states of being, of self and of creation which never excuse the existence, the land, formations comprised of the before and of the would-be, of the might-be and the already done, in an infusion void of man's understanding, yet rife with what I could sense were the best of those billions of dreams flying across the grass-gentle home, which could purposely be built as vestiges of home that were not, that never could have been, as home travels only in skin sack, anywhere, anytime, as man only explodes away from himself while imploding to superbeing, his birthright to be someone, no one, and anyone, as messages selected receive him and capture him, and alternately throttle and obsess, capture and release in all the existential shades of perturbation or patience, of moment, a man flowing just as this river, the Mississippi, the river or sea near to which he has spent his adolescent years, of the purifying and polluting which each must endure, and the most compelling or attractive of which he must select as his siren's call, to push him through a life of land, water, and blood, and into the starred density of flesh, where conifers deciduously drop such needles, seed, spore, and the hard sperm of an earth, all of which are firm guarantees of a difficult reality, most so for the gendering body of wild and loquacious need, in its set to with most of world's and man's invariable isms, as was so for me when the voice was directed, tangled in its web 3 decades back along this impossibly delicate, lovely crescent named Le Nouvel Orleans, with, in, and against whom I, either ox-teamed or solo, have struggled to contemplate or comprehend, if only during the breath of the high blue sky and blessings of halcyon afternoon, as this one. 30 years, mostly in solitude, just behind my shoulders and my writings, helping me to note that everything shivers in the high wind of a true displacement, in particular the facts of the once found and then considered hard and fast, rubric, cliche, and city were but fancy in a light, impervious breeze, nervelessly escorted across spectrums of mood and color, of beauty blown to impress and inspire, but to mean as little as what the rapscallion mind made of it before stamping its image, and that mostly there isn't one moment, act, artifact, or cause to regret, no error that shouldn't be laughed over in later consideration, no meditation which yields a thread of a heightened life in the myriad of recipes or representations, either visceral or ghostly, that all here reciprocates something else. Any essay is complement of absolutely all things. Every creation sings only its own sweet song for a blood minute of harvest. So you run with the herd, which you like, or become lamenter, maker, both. Believe the angels of flight are cicerones of mercenary life, or in mercy mission, or in the modern American struggle that survival has become, where also it is deadly simple to negate your own paltry powers in sacrifice to whatever hazard or healing, and maybe talk to yourself in preamble to the possible, or just that you can't locate a voice to soothe you with the soft semi-truth you need to continue into this new, now, New Orleans, still almost drunk with an overlording and natural pastoral beauty, in whisperings of the past and gone hour, of a matins of eld of America, when life itself was horizon, enough that no answer seemed to be needed, while also, whether one might, he was of no possible prediction or of untoward worry, but the darknesses always exist and remain unlighted, both friendly and tempting, and 30 years flow silently behind me. and how many before me is of no logical matter, as with anyone in this ribald and ricochet called humanness. Even the writing of which I speak in this writing looms as a grand, immutable motive of silence, the life of an American poet being such a slice of the hitherto and the heretofore. My sine wave crosses either axis at some point on its thumping ride down the bumpy road of the schlock and masterpiece journey. So you go sliding, do you? 22 skidoo and nonsense, and hang on to the branches of that tree of the carnival ride, which flings you over water and into outer space, while all of the riders keep faith that recognition will be a kind return, that one remain intact in oxygen parcel, that he not succeed so that silence in the open field no longer entice or invigorate, that the children still leap and laugh and cry at the levee of that fabular river of New Orleans, or that anyone, with name or not, who can be known or seen by someone who is native to such a special and spreading mantle and horsed as the earth lends us for banquet. Everything and nothing at all that may be named, seen, or known ties us together. Everything and then some separates us so that we restart at morning with that most cherished and complex agenda, actually to touch some other man, some other woman, as they so surely are still able to touch us, should each be oriented so. To know beyond speaking's need that toughness to life is still as it is to kindness, that the sun will not shatter, and the children have the allotted hour of their morning to move to maturity and choice and decision. Be they as laughable as some, such as mine, this insistence I feel to make verse about place and person, about possible and pliant lives in a difficult time when poetry is at best of questionable seed and sanity. Still, the breezes of that decision of 30 years' time cross my face today, where once, so long ago, I celebrated the French settlers who hacked out civilization here so that the future could support the childlike, the fantastic dream, reverberations of sacred song, the Creole muses, the mud of empire on its way down to the Delta, all here clearly resting in alluvial deposit that old Daddy River done kindly dropped here for man, and trees cast down roots for anchor, and the whole brush village goes wailing its way to green in temperate southern climate, and ships still slide atop Mississippi, and still do voices contend, exhort, inform, and offend, and still do my own soul and my unhinderable joy go in search of open fields in which at 9 I lay, in a small bedroom earned by my father's industrious hands, and I roam the sylvan mother forest, and note, in youthful circumspection, the gamut of the prototypes on such a nonpareil piece of earthly ground, all here living the ceremonial revival and thrust of things with our beer and our hubris and wrath, that all flow in an exact and insistent course of the path of a river, cutting its barbs, searching the wide water through our waters, though our waters be better, the arms of a welcoming lover, and all else be dulling to this crazy apparatus, drinking only unseen nectar for its nourishment, replenishment, its need to stay around and have that look, have that stirring and rising and heart-starting experience, which makes of our earth strong tonic for song. Even as song alerts us that our joy is finite, that all love returns to the host, that the electric limb falls limply to a surrogate place, numbly to live out the poetry of the hierarchy, of the intellect, of the decades of the power of transcendence and transition, in a tacit holding shell, for that too is part of our morning, our evening, our blood rush, and our river time, in the way always it must, that each of us arrives in a mind for self-question, so that the wreath of the coming goddess be threaded of fresh and fragrant flower, that silence be admittance, only that one must not speak when he knows it not his moment or era, or that the baton is off to the hand of the faster in the endless relay race of genetics and creative impulse, kinetic sang-froid, of the most modern concept, fevered by its need of relating or reproducing, or of acting out a tribal gestalt, or of writing it or describing it, and in such a way, by such natural law, all of the rivers flow right in the equatorial bead they make, to find an open area of Hosanna, just as south-moving Mississippi that floods banks all along its course in strip lands, all along its passage here. So I throw 30 years up or into and upon the winds with my sincerest of smiles for this life, and let myself be unconcerned whether chaff falls to ground, or wheat does, or whether both ride a dandelion wind down to a pasture or harbor unseen, unthought, unsettled, for so it is that nothing ever can be wrong here. There is only this subtle tailoring, again not wrong, of what the tribe wants, as guessed at by those christened experts. There is only song, and never any damage because of tides, or the oleic content of waters, or the sensual receptors which do or don't get noticed, do or don't get touched, do or don't get pleased by another, because the swimming and the speaking really are the sinking and the silence in this perfectly strange world of every cause opposing itself. 30 years of plying verbal trade, thinking I'd pull off some fantasy of prestidigitation, but all's washed up in a mainstream along banks in the commons, and the airs have gone on whistling, being pneumatically piped without any true need or requirement of what single flame any man has added to the history pyre. And yet there is naught for any of us to do but to ignite himself along the sacerdotal lines of the living flint, to burn himself up within suggestion as he has reaped it in the chrysalis. And it falls that rarest magic, anyway, always is the height of the ordinary in the making, a transparency of the obvious and the most apparent, and that the man who worried most also was he most lost, while the elixir rides home, and all of the effects within the stalk become known to themselves. River, child, madman, magus, it is a wandering with the moon that makes anything whole, that straits one with himself, to accept the cornucopic provender which the giver has prepared especially for him, for a man of such talent as yours, be it exactly or roughly what it will, that the war began in you, and there was no possibility to make penance over the problem. So it had to play, did the war, in the faithful way of your plan, even if you weren't paying attention, as likely you were not. Next time more careful, as a lot of peaceable people down in the valley will depend on that cognizance. And you, quite indubitably, upon theirs. But for now, waters surround. My dream is as hopeless without the muscle of your tongue, the whispering impetus. I wait for dividends which I cannot fathom from the mysterious deeps of your trench. The Volga boatman knew not, and today don't, so fine a heritage, nor the Seine captain of the Bateau Mouche, nor Venetian gondolier. Europe cannot guess of the gold in the flood of life that starts beside the Mississippi's banks and fashions the man of the sweetly struck settlement which only could be hers. We dream such lives, all of us, as the one I have lived. And yet I dream a life of verse, which needs neither word nor sound, not meaning or the intelligibly concrete. I dream of city sustenance that needs no directing. I dream a causeless existence on a perfected, tufted isle which man will never see. I dream a difficulty of life so pronounced that the poem is, only can be, purchased by its survival. I dream in no dream state, surrounded only by the impossibly inanimate waters of a spectral river. I dunk myself therein and cease to wait for new perspective. I dream a dwelling, a cave, a provenance, a skin, a making which require nothing but that the tenant appreciate he can turn to either side in enacting business, his fierce demeanor and perspicuous acuity, and yet that is all that any of us has anywhere, whether we notice what any twin yields or symbolizes to any other being. I dream no thing, no dream, no sight in infinity gathering, all tangential courses toward the real. The day is a prophecy of storm, a preface of future wholeness, of mental and physical completeness not possible to arrange artificially in any tropism. And in such a life, upon such a day, bone has blotted the light where once it fell on the eye to either side of my palm. The white has blotted the black, and vice versa. Symbolism newly ordained to anything, only that it may disappear. The river crescent crescendos annunciative intensity, but falls slack at the merest turn of one eye upon it. The river washes a history against the pier, rotting of discarded mores. In and out, the sun plays ode and fugue with the slant of Levee embankment. The story declines to make summary as the customs change only in quarter-century increment. The poet, one new word of 10 million in the exact time period, fossils and mollusks of freshwater birth. There are only 2 centuries to the keep of any cause, and one of them, quite invariably, yearns only for a more luxurious station to life. The other will dupe himself over and over that even one homely accuracy be in notation. All else leads to a most pointless writhing. Bone has blacked out the night, waked and walked off with it unsuspectably, but the new choir has appeared to attend the horizon of the thin mauve cloud against its sunset. The homily to its accuracy, a felt over velvet backdrop, fire order. When the depth of the real can be tuned like capacitance to a point beyond which not, end of the spectrum, beginning of an alternating conscience. 30 years over the shoulder, back toward the town, melts conclusively into city and never disappears. A man's life, played out in rhythms of pain and intemperance, of the vitriolic and the accepting, of an inconstancy split with a most maddening, dulling predictability, a wavering into a changeless state, the Vatic with the entirely mum. Though you forever try to make people and places new, make them anew and live, but the throat still catches around all the reminiscences of the men when he deigns speech. For when our gambler, Americans verily own Poe, placed words in his bind to counter anything of man's, by admonition nevermore, the entire American idiom became storm cloud gray. The poet an empty vehicle of derision and derangement. Without appealing to ego and in fact denouncing it, Poe meant nevermore the poem in America, that his bird needed but one word to tell everything a man could in a lifetime of speaking, and thus was positive, sunk into negative, and far from out of the cradle that our gambler created did it afield fly and flutter and croak and caw in guise of, in lieu of, in proxy of, the pleasure of the sound of one's own voice to himself, of the tickle of something to say that might raise a woman's brow, or even a man's, but like all potent and telling portents, it has gone misconstrued until now. And I have 30 years of feathers and foibles stuffed into my cavity. Now for shoving under the nightfall. Life is unrueable. The mind accepts no apology for its activity, nor will it ever accede to the brilliance or stupidity of any other man's, which guarantees that we meet each other as islands, poking our heads up out of the maelstrom to see anything. There can be no regret. There are only adornment, exposure, and effect, history and its mistaken retelling. There is no American poem Poe could not have written. So we who try must place an ear to that. There will be no single word or event that can pivot us all into some sweet sigh of notorious disorder or the amorous arms of unreachable coquette. We are all as unreachable as she. That placement be the only grace in love's form. Style all slides past with nary a notice, until the eye of demi-vierge shines in this or that grotto upon this or that son of fortune. And if loneliness is our cape, then too must it be fervor. For it is undeniably so that we all frequently fall, as Poe, into his gutter, or out from under character which has stuck us in that stiffening, starchy idea of self, of style, of identity. And yet there the river lies, asking its questions, mockingly retracting them before man has even considered how to phrase what is unanswerable. The 30 years is only a ring-olivio, a red rover where some recondite and perhaps mainly unwanted breakthrough awaits him. Still, enthusiasm of life insists a man go blind, that he fall, that he test the tether and what he has learned as his limits, in the chance at rearranging any fate possible, even that one most dear, most beloved, the Poe and Chaucer hourglass, the insane need of belittling what habit doesn't suit, rather than embracing the river, accepting lack of answer. The image remains blurred, Frankenstein was a great poet, rubbing shoulders with the high literary cadre of the hour. The image became blurred by man's lack of preparation prior to the effort. The life stock is now febrile, will never end. The tonnage of its total displacement. 30 years or 150 in an uncivil war. This poem ends Frankenstein, but goes on singing on its own like the daftest of ravens. And this is the end, a later native spinner spun in an equally short-spanned life, the sprawling son of a bitch of an infectless art that shouts only a bird's one word. The Civil War was only a teenaged acne problem, easily cleared up by the advent of baseball. But by now baseball has become its own conundrum no war can fix. Burlesque and vaudeville must return to the stolid world as legitimate heirs of the gods of all stars. In fact, they have returned in us each, where we daily prepare our shtick to present just in Rising from the Ghost any morning, stand-up comedy and sit-down tragedy. We are moved by neither. As long as our own act stinks, we don't have review. Our elders have been too confused. They have been too drunk with and too fond of their confusion. Thus we too are duped, happy, confused, and wandering, clenching our tethers for length, checking our tethers for length, dipped in beer and duped, theorized and positioned, lovers of a homeland with a plasticine diorama. We are sated only by ether, our dramas only with the dampest of squibs, loaded only with the dampest of squibs. The bedspring is as sprung as the song of the worn-out radio. We need to challenge only that which we can't, and do challenge what has but one changeless aspect, perspicacity, if we believe wren's song and road sign not being what once it may have been. And sometimes the end is a comfort. While in others you've begun some crazy mind regime of miscalculation mixed up with misrepresentation where the whole goes wash on you and is right or wrong or non-existent or just fabular, and all that remains is a senseless, non-historic tale about an apocryphal event. Came down from the mountains to empty itself in the stream. Oh, river, you guided me somewhere. Friends and attackers both, lining the banks as though all of this life were merely staffed film documentary, which is the only medium where one might discover himself in a center place. But all of this is kneeling and false as song. Yet we do go on tripping ourselves, putting ourselves out, as it's said, with the dog, to outrun those histories, if we can, to raise the ugly city for a shining new Mecca, a Mecca that needs not name nor river, neither mosque nor minaret, or damn it, not to raise the mind anymore, a little wobbly from experience, a little punch-drunk, but erect, walking, still guessing, still wondering what any of this is. Clown acts and pose, and very little, if anything, other. So we enter grease paint rodeo, with our heart-bruised tattoo, when once more we've the nerve, and name is again in occlusion. Maybe left out when lucky, and left in when not so. Occlusible, if unforgivable. Living, if entirely relentless. Art just won't do anymore. There aren't 30-year pieces to give away to anyone anymore. And if Poe didn't know what he was doing on Earth, then how the hell does anyone? But in the land of the savages, as goes salience, so goes sapience. But the habit stuck like mood, with or without a tune of consequence, in years of convenience or of contrivance, if stuck, fast as birth skin, strings of days that were moistened by the haunting of realized wish, but the luck all fell through sieve holes, seined out into an alien flow, and without luck, kind or hard, we are left with the last days of some kaleidoscopic melange, forsakers of the chance for creating meaningful challenge, or challenging meanings, and thus all be as decaying as driftwood, vacant, effete. Even worse, though, is the artist plagued by a purpose. No man could be even half as laughable or as wrong. The vessels is calling, rock speaking to its neighbor, void. There isn't any longer a stem to the flower, no oracles not pulled into protectorate, no harm and no storm watch, not prescience or search team, blessedly little recovery. From a puddle of shards of broken glass, the levee looks cold of its November. There only are memorables or not, the recollective trance of past Novembers, or the hangdog determination to exorcise the past as unenterable and incorruptible. And whether so, history carries its own shears, continually to halve itself, then quarter itself, and so on, until a now bare dogwood again blooms without even spare touch of symbol, many months hence. And until then, maybe even now and the time in between, none knows a thing. And just what, in fact, what in fact have I culled from the seashell with my senseless porcelain ear, that made all the figures emerge from trance to dance a lively rondo, to each think of himself much more than man in trying to become man, or to make one of its women? And what have I, in fact, what by fact have I straddled, standing astride the river, or even Herr Olsen's Orontes? Man moves toward heaven and earth in simult. He waltzes lovingly with life, but laughingly with death, in lust with life's challenge, but in enmity with its tyranny. And no word has touched ever a thing, not a place or time, has plunged no wet root into sere earth, hopeful of spring bloom. And that this is true is blessed. For the power of life is not in resilience, in service or in station, but of wild and unprotectable oblivion, which no game masquerades, spinning in a void, sailing for both heaven and earth in some bizarre appointment with faith that one either has existed or will, or that some vestige of life receptacle remains. We know not what to do with such misplaced faith, such arrogant assumption, so we live on as simply as an all-knowing beast can. Though the emblems are due, it appears no one can phrase them or pay that debt. 30 years and 2 words. One more than his raven would have sufficed. To the gods, even the Pacific is a smallish pond. 2 glances could have provided the excitement, but we go on searching for what to do and how to act, when to love in terms only of the years. Nominalization is defunct. Poe, despite his cackling raven, never existed. We know one another only by the thrill of the touch. November 6th, 7th, and 10th, 2011.